Thank you for logging on. October was an incredibly busy month, but it means that all the big major competitions for this year are pretty much behind us, and that is why November is going to be vlog month. This channel was basically built on lots of the vlogs, just kind of following me through my day-to-day fishing, going to the tackle shop, out on the bank filming. Loads and loads of session videos are out there already on this channel, and that's what November is all about. So if that's the kind of videos that you want to see, if you want to get more involved with the channel and just see where we're actually out there fishing, then don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the videos. It's getting colder now. The last couple of days have really kind of fast forwarded into winter. The water temperatures are getting much colder now. We're getting some very windy days now. The leaves are falling off the trees. We've had lots of rain, and we're seeing match weights slowly starting to drop now as we start to head into winter. So to kick off November, I've got 5 of your key questions that I've been getting asked on a regular basis over the last few days, and it all really revolves around ground baits and the types of baits that we're going to be using through this winter, and about some of the qualities that we look for when we're trying to select the perfect ground bait mix for winter. One of the most popular questions that we get asked all the time is, do you have a go-to ground bait mix for winter? In all fairness, no, there isn't one magic mix that we use through the winter. However, there are certain qualities that we look for when we're trying to make a selection. The beautiful thing about lots of the ground baits that are available out there, that are brought out by lots of different brands, is that a lot of them are now labelled up in a way that gives you a great idea about what they are designed to do. As a general guide, any sort of a mix that's got the word F1 on it, that can be a great guide of giving you some sort of a mix that's going to be suitable for winter months. And that's because lots of the F1 mixes that we see available out there from different brands are very similar. They tend to be quite fine. They're not too strong in the fish meal content, and a lot of them are dark as well, which is one of the qualities that we look for when we're trying to select a ground bait mix for winter. Now, whilst we're talking about qualities, what are the qualities that you look for when you are selecting a ground bait mix for winter? There are 2 or 3 different qualities that we look for, and you can probably find these qualities across a wide range of branded ground baits that are available in today's tackle shops. One of the things that we generally look for is a mix that's quite darker than we would normally use in summer, and that's because lots of the venues that we're fishing, the water clarity is much clearer. And so we generally find that a dark mix is more suited, and the fish generally feed a little bit more confidently over dark mixes when the water is clear. The feed value is key as well. As you can imagine, fish are swimming around a lot less during winter because the water's colder, and because they're swimming around less, they're not burning as much energy, so that means that they don't have to eat as much to replace that energy. So the ground bait mixes that we use tend to be lower in feed, so we tend to go down the route of a very fine mix. So the finer the mix you can use, quite often that is going to be the best in winter, because you don't want fish grazing on the actual ground bait and the particles in the ground bait, because they might not eat much anyway during winter, and you're hopefully using the ground bait to attract the fish there. If the ground bait's holding the fish there, then that's an added bonus. But if they are there to feed, you don't want them eating the particles of ground bait, because you want them to be eating your hook bait. And the other trend that I've kind of seen over the last probably 3 or 4 winters is that we generally find that we catch more fish through winter months on sweeter ground bait mixes. Now, when I say you catch more fish, I think the reason for that is that lots of small fish generally prefer a sweeter mix. So if you're using a strong fish meal mix, I've seen it on certain venues where a strong fish meal mix can be a little bit too selective. It might pick you out better fish, but in winter, when bites are at a premium, then if you can use a mix that's going to catch these fish as well as any bonus fish, then that can quite often be the way to go. So I like to use a sweeter mix during winter. A very common question that we get asked all the time on the coaching sessions is, do you mix your ground bait the night before? Now, when I first started fishing the commercial scene, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, with ground baits for skimmers and bream, I was always mixing my ground bait the night before, and that was really through the colder months of the year, through December, January, February and going into March. Now the main reason why I did that was basically to give myself more time on the bank once I got to my peg to set my gear up. That was the only reason originally that I was actually mixing my ground bait the night before. It was quite simply a time saver, and it was one less thing to think about once I actually arrived at my peg. However, when I started to learn more about ground baits, when I started to see how some ground baits are different when you mix them the night before, that's when I started to make it a much more conscious decision to mix the ground bait the night before. So through winter, when you're targeting skimmers and bream and you want your ground bait mix to be a little bit more inert, then that is what I would do. I would mix it the night before. But the one thing that I always do when I do that is that I put the ground bait, once it's mixed, I put the ground bait into an airtight bag, squeeze all the air out, and I pop that in the fridge overnight. Now that is purely a confidence thing, and the reason why I do that is because there were a couple of occasions years ago when I was using a particular mix, and when I got to my peg the following day, the mix smelt a little bit off. It smelt a little bit sour, as though it had started to it started to smell in a way that I didn't want it to smell, you know. I'd picked that mix because it smelt nice, because it was a mix that I'd caught on, and that is exactly how I wanted it. So whilst having a mix that might have gone off a little bit may not make any difference to your fishing, it might not mean any more fish or less fish, it was a confidence thing. So that's something that I do through winter. Mix it the night before, airtight bag, squeeze the air out and pop it in the fridge. And that just means that when you get to your peg, it's as fresh as what it was when you mixed it. However, it's had more time to absorb the water, so it's a little bit more inert. A great question that we seem to get asked about a lot in winter is, do you always target the deeper areas during winter? Now, as a general rule, I would always like to target the deepest part of the swim. However, you don't have to do that exclusively. Now that basically means that if you're on a venue where you've got a little bit of water, then you could put one line or one swim in the deepest area, but then you can also cover your options, cover your bases, and have another area of the swim fed for you to target, just in case those fish aren't in the deepest water. Now, just a key detail about targeting the deepest area of the swim is, because you may think the fish are in the deep water, that doesn't necessarily mean that the fish are going to be down on the bottom. Quite often, and I see it a lot, and I see it a lot in match reports, and I know of venues that aren't too far away from where I live, that some of the venues are 12 and 13 feet deep. However, the fish are still at half depth during winter. The fish are going to be at a depth that they are most comfortable in, and they're going to be where they want to be. So even if you are targeting the deep water, if you're getting line bites, if you're fishing with a pole for example, or a waggler, then don't be afraid to shallow up if you're missing bites or if you're not catching. Just because the fish might be in that deeper water, don't automatically assume that they're going to be on the bottom. And the fifth and final question is one that could probably warrant its own video, and that is, how does watercraft change during winter? Watercraft is a massive thing, and if you're not familiar with what watercraft is, it's basically the way that you approach your peg. There may be certain times of day when the fish are in certain areas of the peg. It could be in relation to where the sun's hitting the water, it could be something to do with wind direction, it could be just a tow. If you've got a tow on it, if it's pushing left to right for example, the fish might be all at one end of the lake at a certain time of day. Temperatures change in winter, you know, quite often they're very cold in the morning, and it could be cold at the end of the match as well, and the middle part of the day could be the warmest part of the day while the sun's out. So light levels change as well, and that could be something that comes into it later on in the session. But as a general rule, when we're targeting any sort of a venue during winter, your first half an hour can possibly be the best time for you to catch. So I often err on the side of caution. You know, fish have been cold overnight, they might have just been laid there. All of a sudden there's a little bit of bait going in, there's a little bit of activity on the bank, and it's quite often that the first or second cast of a session could be the ones where you're going to catch a bonus fish. It could be a bream or it could be carp. Okay, so be very, very alert in those first 30 minutes of a session. Quite often the middle part can be very, very difficult, but then later on in the day, You know, if the sun's been on the water, that could be when the water temperature is at its highest for that day. The light levels might start to go as well, which might give fish a little bit more confident in feeding, certainly in margins or in clearer water. So the final 45 minutes, the final 30 minutes can quite often be the best time to catch. So just think about those windows, just look at those opportunities where, you know, just be ready for bites. It's quite easy in winter, certainly if it's cold, when you're wrapped up nice and cozy and warm, that you don't want to be too active, but you've got to stay sharp. And because the fish are feeding less, just think about how important that one extra fish could actually be. It's going to be a fantastic month on this channel with loads of vlogs getting rolled out now that the major competitions are behind us. So there's going to be lots and lots of session videos getting filmed for you. So if you want to see those, then please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'm really looking forward to delivering you lots more content through November.